All right, let's move on to a little draft talk, if that's all right with you guys. Now, we always talk about three tech, right? We are constantly talking about three tech. And if you guys are new here, what we mean by three tech, it's really simple. You've got gap alignment. When you hear us say three tech, think B gap. When you hear us say one tech, think A gap. Okay. So when we say three tech, we're talking about a B to C gap penetrator on the interior of the defensive line, if that makes sense. And then with a one tech or a nose, he's that guy holding the point of attack, right? Either playing zero tech, shade, or one, like right there in the mix, looking to intentionally tie up a double team block and kind of anchor the run defense. Okay. So when we say three tech, it's a tier one position of importance. What we're talking about is creating pressure opposite your best edge rusher. So you want a three tech that can warrant a double team in a perfect scenario, perfect world, and then you want an edge defender that's going to warrant a double team as well, right? So you've got Micah Parsons on one side. We need that three tech. Now, some people believe it's Devonte Wyatt, and I can respect that. Listen, he was one of my favorite players coming out in the draft too. Our board suggested it was a great pick. It was like, okay, well, we're picking here. Now, the back half of the first round, you can't expect to get a slam dunk every time. We've had actually, it seems like, more success out of the second round than we have the first round, at least recently, I believe. I feel comfortable saying that. But when you looked at the defensive tackle, we took Devonte Wyatt. Every player has strengths and weaknesses. You've got some of those players that are at the top of the list where you go, wow, they really flash, they really pop. They bring a lot to the table, maybe more so than those back of the first round guys, right? So what we did was we compiled a bunch of information here together from Football Insights. You guys make sure you go give them a follow at @fball_insights. And we're going to kind of look at the past draft classes, okay? It's all the way back to 2019. We won't go back too far there. Maybe we could kind of see who were the slam dunk picks and this and that. But you've got what we call a heat map. I believe that's what this is called, right? And what it's going to show is A gap alignment, B gap alignment, and over tackle, okay? So that's going to show you where they're aligning at, whether they're a nose or a three tech, or someone who's a little more versatile, they can kick out to over the tackle with a 4-eye or a 5 tech, right? And then we're going to talk about run defense, which is stop percentage, okay, run stop rate. And then we're going to talk about pass rush, which is pass rush win rate, and pressure percentage, okay? And I'm trying to see missed tackles is the other thing there as well. So you've got a missed tackle percentage in run defense as well. So you got 4 metrics spread out over 2 aspects of playing defensive tackle in the NFL, which is run defense as pass rush, okay? So let's kind of go back in time first, okay? Let's go back. Let's do it recently. Let's go back to 2025. You'll notice on the heat map here, if you guys can see it, I'll try to zoom in a touch. I apologize if it's a little bit hard to read. That's probably a little bit better. So in 2025, who were the best defensive tackles? Mason Graham was at the top of the list. You'll notice his stop percentage, 11.4%. That's lit up, dark green. You've got missed tackle was only 5.9%. It's fairly dark green, but not the darkest of the green, right? Pass rush win rate was 14% for Mason Graham. And then the pressure percentage was 10.3%. What you're looking for is a player that's all green across the board here on this heat map, right? Now, if you get someone who maybe isn't necessarily all green, but it's there's no red involved, that tells you they're probably a pretty balanced player, right? You don't feel like they have any glaring issues here. So Mason Graham, hands down, was the best defensive tackle according to these metrics. Now, he lined up in the B gap 77% of the time. I remember people saying Mason Graham's a nose, And I'm like, why are you saying he's a nose just because of his body build? Guys, they said the same thing about T'Vondre Sweat. And he's had some injuries, but he started off really strong, right? So you can't just look at someone's build and say, nope, they're a nose, right? You got to look in terms of deployment and alignment. The same thing was said about Kenneth Grant. Now, Kenneth Grant didn't have as good of a year as Mason Graham. Obviously, they were teammates out of Michigan. So what you're seeing, though, is in the A gap, Kenneth Grant was there 29% of the time. What do we always say? Three tech is more important than nose because you're going to be in nickel defense, your nickel 4-2-5 or nickel 2-4-5 if we go back to the 34 defense. Spoiler alert, it's the same thing, okay? It is what it is. They're edge defenders. They're not defensive linemen or outside linebackers. Actually, they're edge defenders. But with like Kenneth Grant, the reason he only had less than 30% snaps at the A gap and his teammate Mason Graham only had 7 is because Kenneth Grant was playing nose in their base defense, right? Which means he still played in the B gap 70% of the time. So when we say we need a 3 tech and people go, oh, he's not a 3 tech. Okay, so it's kind of like the Lucas Van Ness thing. He never started a game. Did you even do any research and look at how they play their seniors in Iowa? Like the reason he didn't start is because they've got a rule that their seniors play. Their seniors start. They would start, they come immediately out, LVM will go in, right? So it's important to understand why these guys have the number of snaps that they do at each particular gap assignment. So anyway, Kenneth Grant, not as good here, right? When you look at this across the board, what you're seeing is 7.3% stop rate in the run game, okay? So even though he played 29% of the snaps in the A-gap, he was their anchor, he was their defensive tackle, his stop rate was only 7.3%. Not a good look, right? Now, he's taking on double teams most likely. Kobe Wooden had a bunch of stops last year. His stop rate was pretty darn good. We need to see what his actual stop rate was because it was really impressive. That's one of the aspects of Kobe Wooden that I was like, yeah, he impressed me at defensive tackle at nose. When you look at his missed tackle percentage, however, with Kenneth Grant, it was only 2.9%. So that was great. So again, his run stop rate was low. His missed tackle rate was great, right? So what's that tell you? Probably his gap integrity, right, was what was limiting him, maybe getting blown off the ball and occupying those double teams was limiting him from getting a higher stop rate as opposed to the fact that he may be missing tackles, which was not the case, right? But again, you've got one in the light red, one in the darkish green, and then you get the pass rush. What do you got here? His win rate was 9.1%. His pressure percentage was 8.8%. Both of those are in the light pink. So when you look at the heat map, that would suggest Kenneth Grant is not going to be a great football player, right? He does a few things good. You've got some tools and some size to work with. He played at a big program. Those things matter. But if you had to pick between Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, you would go with Mason Graham. Now, a deciding factor for me is the fact that Mason Graham played more three-tech than Kenneth Grant, right? And again, that's more important in the league because these nose tackles are going to be taking on double teams. You're already winning a +1 hat count. You better have somebody at three-tech who can win their battles both in the run and the pass. Walter Nolan, you guys know, was my draft crush last year. Look at the heat map. Stop rate, 10.9%. Missed tackle rate, 3.1%. Both of them in the dark green, right? And then you jump over to pass rush. He had a 10.1% pass rush win rate and then a 9.5% pressure rate. None of those are in the green. Neither of those are in the green. But you see there's no red across the board. He's a more balanced defensive lineman, and he's going to play three-tech, right? He was my draft crush. He ended up having a great year. I think he played 140 snaps. He got hurt, but he was grading out in the 70s according to PFF, so that ended up being a hit. There were a lot of people late in the draft. I caught some heat because I said Walter Nolan was my guy personally when I watched the tape. There were people going, Derek Harmon's way better. Derek Harmon's way better. Derek Harmon last year, his stop rate was 6.5%. His missed tackle percentage was 15.4%. Guys, he was cheeks in the run game. Well, we don't need a run. We don't need a run defender. We need a pass rusher. Okay, 12.3% win percentage and 11% pressure rate. That's good numbers. Those are great numbers, right? We're all in agreement. But why does Derek Harmon struggle in the run game? Derek Harmon, in my opinion, feels like Devonte Wyatt. Solid pass rusher, not so good against the run. Now, if we go back to Devonte Wyatt's year, there were only 2 defensive linemen listed here in 2022 that they've got listed, okay? So when you look at it, Wyatt actually played the B gap 63% of the time. The other one was his teammate, Jordan Davis. Jordan Davis was ranked higher than Wyatt, okay, obviously, and he was a physical freak. When you look at Jordan Davis, run stopper, 9.5% and 5.1% in the run metrics, okay, and stop and miss tackle rate. When you go to the pass rush side, though, Jordan Davis, 4.9% win rate, 5% pressure percentage. That is absolute cheeks. Now, Jordan Davis has gone on to be a pretty good football player with Philadelphia. I haven't looked at his PFF grades, but he's definitely played a role in that defense. But again, who is their main guy? It's Jalen Carter, right? Well, Jalen Carter is their 3-tech. So this is why it's more important. They went back the very next year and got Jalen Carter. So let's bounce back to 2023. Jalen Carter across the board, 11.8% stop rate. His missed tackle percentage was 13%. We know he kind of plays a little bit reckless and getting after the quarterback, but he can kind of afford to do that at 14.8% win rate, 10.9% pressure percentage. Okay. Now back down to Wyatt. Wyatt is the perfect example. He was the better defensive lineman on our board, even for me, even better than Jordan Davis from a personal standpoint, because Jordan Davis was a nose and Devonte Wyatt was a 3-tech. And when you look at Devonte Wyatt, there was only one thing in the green, and that was missed tackle percentage. Well, that's something he struggled with in Green Bay. So when he struggled with that year one, it's like, okay, I think he'll figure that out. He did kind of figure it out this year, but his run defense grade is horrible, right? His stop percentage was only 8.7% at Georgia. That's very, very, very light green, almost in the white, almost kind of neutral, right? His win rate in pass rush was 10.1%. His pass rush win rate was 9.7%. So Devonte Wyatt is like a good, safe pick. Well, guess what you get with good, safe picks? When you go safe, right, you're going to get a player that has a high floor but a low ceiling. And when you look at Devonte Wyatt and how he's performed, right, he hasn't been able to stay healthy. He's got a weak spot to his game, and that's run defense. He's got a strong point where he's a very good pass rusher. It's exactly what we got with Devonte Wyatt. So I like to kind of go back in time and look at that. Now let's fast forward a touch to this year and see who kind of, well, let me show you somebody who was all in the green. Quinnen Williams that the Cowboys just traded draft picks for and got down in Dallas. Guys, that you guys heard me when that broke. People were raking them over the coat. They let Micah go and got Quinnen Williams. I was like, yeah, I would not have let Micah go, but Quinnen Williams is a hell of a get. He's a great defensive tackle, right? He is green across the board, 13.3 and 2.7 in terms of his run stop rate's 13.3%. His missed tackle rate is 2.7%. His pass rush win rate, 15.8%. And his pressure percentage was 14.5%. Slam dunk, top 5 pick, run the card. That's your guy. You've got to be drafting extremely high to get those type of guys, right? And I don't know where Quinnen Williams went, but if he went outside of the top 10, that is extremely, extremely rare, right? So, again, looking at some of these players, it's fun to go back and say, okay, how did they actually stack up, right? How did they actually stack up in the league? Now, when we go to this year's draft, what does the defensive tackle class look like? One of the things that we keep talking about is it just looks like defensive tackle, unless one of these upper echelon guys fall in our lap, we're not going to be able to get one at 52. Okay. And you can kind of see it comparatively speaking to the rest of the drafts across the board, in recent history. They've got Peter Woods at the top of the list here. We've actually got Peter Woods listed as our third best defensive tackle. Our defensive tackles on our PTA big board, as it sits today on February the 20th, and this will change. We've got McDonald, Caleb Banks, Peter Woods, Kristen Miller, Lee Hunter, Darrell Jackson, and then Dominic Orange. Okay. They've got Peter Woods, Caleb Banks, McDonald, Caden McDonald, I think's his name, Lee Hunter, and then Kristen Miller. Okay. So we're much higher on Kristen Miller than they are here if these are in a particular ranking. Now, what do these guys do well? First of all, when you look at Peter Woods stop percentage, 11.3%. His missed tackle rate, 13.5%. That's kind of Jekyll and Hyde. He's got a high stop rate, but he's going to miss a lot of tackles. Probably going to see a lot of flash plays, right? Pass rush win rate, 11.4%. His pressure percentage is 7.1%. Okay, so this is a guy, Peter, I know some people love Peter Woods. He was down on our board, and I can't remember who it was, kept reaching out to me and going, Peter Woods is too low. Peter Woods is too low. He's going to be a first-round pick. Daniel Jeremiah had him as an early second-round pick. We weren't as big on him. And this is one of the reasons why I'm sure it shook out on our board the way it did, even though he still lands in the 31 spot. I don't see him as the top defensive tackle because it's too inconsistent. It doesn't mean he won't play better when he gets to the National Football League. But when you look at his body of work as a whole and you kind of take all metrics into consideration, you look at our board and how it shook out, that has no ties to these metrics whatsoever. You see a player that's 1 second he's great in the run, the next second he's bad. 1 second he's great in the pass rush, next second he's bad. He played for Clemson. When was the last time a Clemson defensive lineman worked out, right? You see down here, the only one on this list, the short list, recently in 2023 was Breesy. I don't know how Breesy's playing. Maybe he's having a great year, but that's really the only one that's there. He had 3 of the 4 in the green, unlike only 2 of the 4 in the green for our boy Peter Woods. Now you go on down the list, you got 2 more Clemson guys. Christian Wilkins, he can't get a job right now because he's acting like a freaking weirdo in the locker room and kissing on guys and making them feel uncomfortable and stuff. You guys do your own research there. That's why anytime somebody brings up Christian Wilkins to me, I'm like, do we want that locker room headache? They run him out of everywhere he goes. They run him out of that place. Like, there's a reason Miami didn't keep him. And then I think he went to the Raiders. He was too weird for the Raiders. And we've seen that locker room. They'll, run around, drinking and smoking cigars in the locker room and it looks like a party over there, even though they haven't won a damn thing in how long. He wasn't even good enough for their locker room. So it is what it is there, right? DeMarcus Lawrence as well. I think that's DeMarcus Lawrence or no, Dexter Lawrence was it? I'm sorry. Dexter Lawrence. Now, Dexter Lawrence looked like a much better prospect here. And I think, didn't he end up, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, I think he ended up with the Giants, and he's a solid football player, right? I'm almost positive he ended up with the New York Giants. Somebody post right here, comment, and let us know in the chat. I'm pretty sure he did. But Dexter Lawrence was solid across the board. 8.7, 1.1, 12.1, 12.2. In the green, 3 of those. The 4th is a light green, but definitely nowhere near the red. So Dexter Lawrence obviously was a solid get there. So you're looking for guys who are going to be steady across the board. There you see Jerry Simmons, or I think that's his name, Jerry Simmons. I think he ended up going to Tennessee to the Titans, and he's been kind of an anchor for them for a long time if he's still with them. Maybe he's been traded since then, but he was green across the board as well. So again, when you look at the defensive tackle position, this is what I'm talking about. Just because 3-tech is important doesn't mean you reach on your board. You know, they're not a quarterback. Quarterback is the only position in the NFL draft where you're willing, in my opinion, you're willing to go down a tier to reach because it's that important of a position, right? That's the reason Greg Cosell says every spring there's 2 drafts. There's the NFL draft and there's the quarterback draft. Quarterbacks are treated way different than every other player in the draft, if that makes sense. So that's just kind of a quick look at those defensive tackles. I also included here our draft board and how everybody shook up. Like when you look at how this shakes out here, you can see they got Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan. We have Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, and Walter Nolan. Walter Nolan was my guy. And obviously all these guys are off to a solid start. You can see the PFF grade there for Walter Nolan, 74.1 as a rookie. If he stays healthy, guys, he is going to be a dog. Now, Clayton, why were you so high on him? Because of the people I respect. First of all, he had an opportunity to go to the Senior Bowl. He got a 5-point bonus. He dominated at the Senior Bowl. Okay, check the box. Greg Cosell, he watched the tape and said, this is the best defensive tackle in the entire draft. We gave him a 7-point bonus because of that. His final grade ended up being a 19.9. Lo and behold, he ends up being a 74.1 according to PFF in terms of grades. Mason Graham caught a little heat. There's some people that didn't like Mason Graham as much as I did. He was big on our board because of the consensus big board, the PFF big board. He was a top-graded defensive tackle. Greg Cosell did not like him as much as he did Walter Nolan. Now, he didn't say Mason Graham's going to be a bad football player. He spoke positive about him. That's why he only got a 1-point bonus, okay? But he gushed over Walter Nolan, absolutely gushed over him, right? So he nailed it. 74.1 for Walter Nolan, 68.7 for Mason Graham in terms of PFF their rookie year. And in the 2026 class, you can kind of see, I've got those there so you can compare them really, really closely. If you guys want to know where you can find this, it's in our Patreon group, patreon.com/PackerFan Total Access. It's the best way to support what we do here at PTA. So we got the 2026 class lined up in there for you guys as well. And I just want to throw this out there that Jordan Reed over on X actually tweeted out, Kristen Miller, interior defensive lineman, Georgia 6'4", 310, quick-handed and powerful interior player. Scheme only allowed him to show flashes as a true penetrator. Prospect with early starter potential that's likely to go in round 2. So somebody asked me yesterday on Twitter, I should have screenshotted that tweet. They said, who would you be willing to trade up for in this draft? And Kristen Miller was one of those players. What I tried to give him was 3 players I'd be willing to trade up for into the bottom or the backside of the first round, or in the early part of the second round. So I gave 3 players at each. Kristen Miller was one of those. Again, I have no reason to believe that Kristen Miller is going to be as good as Walter Nolan. So don't take this as Clayton saying that's this year's Walter Nolan. That's not what I'm saying. There is no Walter Nolan this year, okay? But when you look at it, Kristen Miller has as good a shot as anybody in here. And to me, I think you got a better chance of getting him in the second round if you're willing to trade up. And unless he falls in your lap, I do not see him falling in our lap at 52, though. So Holmes re-upped his membership here on YouTube. Appreciate you, Holmes. You're the man. So there you go, guys. That's just a quick deep dive into the defensive tackles, both past and present, in terms of this year's draft. Let me know in the comments, how do you feel about this year's class and how everything kind of shook up from past years' classes? Do you think we nailed it? Do you think we were off on 1 or 2 players? Is there a player that maybe we didn't mention that was a lower draft steal? Let us know that in the comments as well. Make sure you hit like for us, hit subscribe, click the bell icon as well.